On his first day, he asked me what time I usually left work. I thought it was small talk. New guy trying to get a feel for the schedule, figure out who closes up, who's around. I told him 6, sometimes 6:30 if the register didn't balance right away. He nodded, wrote something down on the little notepad he kept in his apron pocket, and that was it. I didn't think about it again until I noticed he was still there at 6:15 restocking shelves that didn't need restocking, on a day he wasn't even scheduled to close. His name was Theo. He'd transferred in from some bookstore 2 towns over, the kind of transfer that nobody really explains and you don't ask about because it's not your business. He was quiet in a way that wasn't awkward, just economical, like he only spent words when they were worth spending. I liked that about him before I even knew I liked him, if that makes sense. Some people feel silence because it makes them nervous. Theo let silence sit there like it was doing something useful. The store was small. Used books, some new releases up front, a coffee machine that only half the staff knew how to descale properly. I'd worked there 2 years by the time Theo showed up, long enough that I'd stopped noticing the smell of old paper, long enough that closing alone didn't bother me anymore. It used to. When I first started, walking to my car in that back lot at night gave me the creeps. The street light back there had been out since before I was hired, but you get used to things. You stop clocking the small fears because nothing's ever happened, so why would it? Theo didn't seem to believe in that logic. The second week he worked there, I was locking up and he was still hanging around by the coffee machine, wiping down a counter that was already clean. I told him he could head out, I had it. He said he would in a minute. I locked the front, we walked out the back together, and he didn't say much, just sort of existed near me until I got in my car and started the engine. Then he lifted a hand, said goodnight, and walked to his own car on the other side of the lot. I didn't clock it as anything, not yet. It happened again the next week, and the week after that, not every single night, but enough that I started noticing the pattern before I understood it. If I was closing, he found a reason to still be there. If I mentioned I was tired and might leave a few minutes early, he'd suddenly remember something he needed to grab from his car too. He was never weird about it, never made it feel like a big thing, but it kept happening, and eventually I said something. "You know, I've closed this place by myself for like a year and a half, right?" He looked up from the box of paperbacks he was sorting like I'd caught him doing something. "I know. So you don't have to hang around." "I know that too." I waited for more, he didn't give me more. He just went back to sorting the paperbacks, and I stood there a second longer than I needed to, feeling like I'd asked a question that had an answer, just not one he was going to give me that day. I want to be honest about something. I wasn't out at that job. I wasn't exactly closeted either, it just hadn't come up, the way it doesn't come up in a lot of small towns unless you make it come up, and I'd learned to just let people assume whatever they assumed. So when I started noticing that I looked forward to the nights Theo was working, that I started timing my closing shifts around his schedule without fully admitting that's what I was doing, I didn't have anyone to say it out loud to. I just sort of carried it around by myself for a while, turning it over like a stone in my pocket. It wasn't just the walking to the car thing either. That was just the first thing I noticed, the thing that started the noticing. Once I started paying attention, I saw other pieces of it. He always sat facing the door at the little break table in the back, every single time, like it mattered to him where the exits were. He flinched just barely if someone came up behind him without a sound first, a step, a cleared throat, something. He never talked about his family beyond the bare minimum. He had a way of going somewhere else in his head sometimes, mid-conversation, like a wave of something passed through him, and he had to wait it out before he could come back to whatever we'd been saying. None of it was dramatic. If you weren't looking, you wouldn't see it. But I was looking, because somewhere in those first few weeks I'd stopped seeing Theo as just the new coworker and started seeing him as a person I wanted to understand completely, and once you want that, you notice everything. I asked Marisol about it, one of the other people who worked there, because she'd been around when he transferred in and I figured maybe she knew something. She just shrugged and said all she'd heard was that he requested the transfer himself, no drama, no explanation given. "He's a good worker," she said, "kind of a closed book, no pun intended." She laughed at her own joke and went back to shelving. A closed book, that fit, but the thing about closed books is they still have a shape to them. You can tell there's something inside even if you can't read it. It was maybe 2 months in when things started shifting between us, slow enough that I couldn't point to a single moment and say that's when it changed. It was more like a temperature rising by degrees. We started talking more during slow shifts, actual talking, not just logistics. He had this dry sense of humor that snuck up on you, delivered so flat you almost missed the joke was a joke. He liked bad science fiction and would defend it with a straight face. He remembered small things I said, offhand things, and brought them back up days later in a way that told me he'd actually been listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. I remember one night we were closing together and it started raining hard, the kind of rain that comes out of nowhere in the summer and turns the parking lot into a mirror. We stood under the awning by the back door because neither of us wanted to make a run for it, and there was this stretch of maybe 10 minutes where we just stood there, close, not talking, watching the rain come down under the one working light in that whole lot. You don't have to wait with me, I said, because it felt like something needed to be said, even if it was the wrong thing. I know, he said again, same 2 words as before. But this time he looked at me when he said it, and there was something in his face that wasn't just politeness. It was closer to a decision, like he was choosing to stay actively rather than just not knowing how to leave. Why do you, though? He didn't answer right away. The rain kept coming down. I thought maybe he wasn't going to answer at all, that we'd just stand there until it passed and pretend the question hadn't been asked, which honestly would have been fine. I was getting used to his silences having their own kind of honesty. But then he said, quiet, almost like he was talking more to the rain than to me. I don't like the idea of someone walking to their car alone in the dark, that's all. That's all. That's all I'm saying tonight. Which wasn't a real answer, not really, but it told me there was a real answer somewhere, one he wasn't ready to give yet, and something about the way he said it made me want to wait for it instead of pushing. So I did, I let it go that night. I told myself I could be patient about this because whatever it was, it clearly mattered to him, and it was starting to matter to me that it mattered to him. The rain stopped eventually. We ran to our cars anyway, laughing about nothing, soaked from 10 feet of open air, and I remember sitting in my car afterward just grinning at the steering wheel like an idiot, feeling something in my chest I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. I didn't have a name for it yet. I just knew I wanted more nights like that one. Things keep building from there slowly, the way they do when neither person wants to be the one who says the thing first and ruins it if they're wrong. We started finding reasons to work the same shifts on purpose instead of by accident. We started texting outside of work. Nothing big, just stupid memes and updates on whatever book he was reading and me sending him pictures of my cat doing nothing in particular. Small stuff. But small stuff adds up into something if you let it. I found out more about him in pieces, the way you find out about anyone who's careful with themselves. He grew up a couple hours away. He had one younger brother. His parents were still together, still lived in the same house he grew up in. He didn't say much about why he'd left his last job, and I didn't push, because by then I'd learned that pushing just made him go quiet in that particular way, and I'd rather have him open a little on his own time than closed completely because I'd rushed him. Then one night, about 3 months after he started, everything cracked open at once, and not in the way I expected. We closed up together again, another one of those nights, and instead of just walking to our cars, we ended up leaning against mine, talking, not ready for the night to be over yet. I don't remember exactly how the conversation got there, but somehow we ended up talking about fear, about the specific kind of fear you carry without noticing you're carrying it until someone asks you to name it. I said something about how I used to be scared of that parking lot before I got used to it, how you just sort of build a callus over things eventually. His face changed when I said that, not dramatically, just a shift like something in him had gone still. You shouldn't have to build a callus over it, he said, you should just be safe. Nobody's just safe, Theo, that's not how the world works. I know that better than you think. There was something in the way he said it, some weight behind the words that didn't match the casual way we'd been talking a second earlier, and I felt the air between us change. I asked him what he meant. He didn't answer right away. He looked out at the parking lot at that same broken streetlight, and I watched him decide something. My brother, he said, he's the reason I ask people what time they're leaving. It's not, I know it's a weird thing to notice about me. I know it probably seems like a lot for someone who barely knows you. But 3 years ago he was walking to his car after a late shift at a job kind of like this one, and somebody followed him from inside the store. Just followed him out. It wasn't even about anything. Wrong place, wrong time, all of it completely random. He's okay now. Physically, he's okay. But I wasn't there. I was 2 hours away and I didn't know until the next morning, and I've never. He stopped. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to fill the space before he was ready to fill it himself. I've never been able to let it go, he said finally. Not knowing, not being there, so now I notice things. Who's walking out alone, what time people leave. I know it's not my job to fix that for everyone. I know I can't actually control whether something happens, but I can at least make sure nobody I work with walks out into an empty lot by themselves if I can help it. It's not about you specifically. It wasn't at first. And now. He looked at me then, really looked, in a way he hadn't let himself before, like he'd been keeping something behind a door and had just decided to open it. Now it's about you specifically, he said. I think it has been for a while, I just didn't know how to say it without it sounding like I was making my own stuff for your problem. I didn't say anything smooth, I didn't have anything smooth to say. I just said, it's not a problem, and reached over and took his hand right there in the parking lot under that one broken streetlight that had never once bothered me until that exact moment, when I suddenly understood it had been part of the story the whole time, waiting for me to notice. He let out this breath like he'd been holding it for 3 months, maybe longer. "I didn't want to tell you like this," he said. "I had this whole other version of it in my head, less rain-soaked parking lot, more actual plan." "I like this version," I said. "It's not exactly cinematic, but it's real." That got a small laugh out of him, the first one that night, and something eased in his shoulders that I hadn't even realized had been tense. We didn't kiss that night. I want to be honest about that because it would be easy to say we did to make the story move faster than it actually moved, but that's not how it happened. That night we just stood there a while longer, hands still linked, not needing to rush toward anything because the thing that had needed to happen had happened. He'd told me. I'd heard him. That was enough for one night. The kiss came about a week later, and it wasn't dramatic either. It was after a shift in the store, after we'd both stayed late for no real reason except that we didn't want to leave each other yet, and he was locking the front door and I was standing closer than I needed to be. And he turned around and there wasn't really anywhere else for the moment to go except toward each other. It was quiet. It felt like something we'd both already decided a while ago and were just finally catching up to. I won't pretend everything after that was easy, because it wasn't, not completely. Theo carried what happened to his brother in ways that showed up sometimes when I least expected it. A bad night where he needed to hear from me later than usual just to know I'd got home fine. A flinch at a loud noise in the store that took him a second too long to shake off. A stretch of a few days once where he went quiet again in that old, careful way. And I had to remind myself that quiet wasn't always a locked door, sometimes it was just someone working through something on their own time. I learned the difference eventually. It took patience I didn't always know I had. And I carried my own stuff into it too. I wasn't used to someone caring about me in that specific, watchful way, and there were nights early on where it felt like too much, where I had to tell him gently that I appreciated it but I needed him to trust that I could take care of myself sometimes too, that his love for me couldn't be built entirely out of fear for me. That was a hard conversation. He didn't take it well at first. But he heard it eventually, and it made things better between us, not worse, because it meant we were being honest instead of just being careful. His brother came to visit, about 8 months into me and Theo being together. I was nervous about that in a way I hadn't been nervous about much else, because I knew what that person represented, even though I'd never met him. But he turned out to be warm, funny in a different way than Theo, quicker to laugh. He pulled me aside at one point while Theo was in the other room and told me, "He's different since he met you, lighter." I didn't think I'd see him like that again, not after everything. I didn't know what to say to that. I just told him I was glad, and I meant it more than the words could really carry. It's been almost 2 years now. I still think about that first week sometimes, about the way he asked what time I usually left, about how strange that question felt before I understood what was underneath it. I think about how easy it would have been to miss the whole thing, to just take it as a coworker being oddly attentive and never ask why, to let the mystery stay a mystery because asking felt like too much effort for something that might not matter. I'm glad I asked. I'm glad I noticed enough to want to know more, and I'm glad he trusted me enough to eventually tell me in his own time, in his own way, standing in a rain-soaked parking lot under a streetlight that never got fixed, and honestly, I hope it never does. Some things you want to leave exactly the way they were when they mattered. He still walks me to my car. Every single time, even now, even though there's nothing left to explain about it, even though I know the whole story behind it and could probably recite it back to him word for word. I used to think that would fade once the mystery was solved, once the why didn't matter anymore because I already knew it. It didn't fade. If anything, it got quieter and steadier, less like a habit built out of fear and more like something built out of just wanting to be near me a few extra minutes before the day ends. Some people fall in love with a person all at once. I fell in love with Theo, one small, unexplained thing at a time, one habit I couldn't quite make sense of, until all those pieces added up into someone I understood completely, someone whose quiet made sense to me the way silence only makes sense once you know what it's protecting. I still don't park under a working streetlight if I can help it, not because I need it anymore, just because some habits, once they're built out of love instead of fear, are worth keeping.